Now, this is an Audi. Audi shouldn't do that. Hello guys, and welcome to this Volkswizard video, which today is a special video because for the first time on this channel it features a head-to-head test of two different cars from two different manufacturers, one of which, shock horror, is not from the Volkswagen group. Now, I've always been fascinated with the rivalry between Audi and BMW. These two manufacturers, completely independent of each other, located just 50 miles apart in Bavaria, control a lot of the global prestige car market. And there are two cars which, at least on paper, look surprisingly similar. In the blue corner we have the Audi S3 Quattro, released just a few weeks ago, and in the grey corner we have the BMW M135i xDrive. Now, these are both 300 horsepower hot hatches with four-wheel drive, and yeah, today we want to find out which one of these two is the best hot hatch. Now, we're based here at Gilks's Garage Cafe. It's a family firm located in the village of Kyneton, just a few minutes off the M40. They're open during lockdown for takeaways Wednesdays to Sundays, so if you want to come out for a drive and you live in the local area, or a bike ride, it's a really good destination to come to have a coffee, have a snack. Okay, before we have a closer look at these two cars, let's just see how they stack up on paper, because the similarities are surprising, but also there are quite a few differences that might make a difference to which one you prefer. Now, firstly, quite handily, they're both the same price, so roughly about £38,000. As I mentioned in the intro, they've both got just over 300 horsepower. So the Audi's got 310 metric horsepower, that's 306 brake horsepower. The BMW's got 306 metric horsepower, which equates to 302 brake horsepower. I don't think you'll notice that, and you probably won't notice it because the BMW's got a lot more torque. It's got 450 Newton meters, while the Audi's restricted, I think, to 400 because it's got a dual clutch gearbox, which isn't as strong as the torque converter 8-speed in this car. That's actually a 7-speed box as well. Weight wise, they're both around 1500 kilograms. Efficiency wise, the BMW actually is significantly cleaner when it comes to CO2, so it's 167 to 174 depending on spec. The Audi is in the sort of the 180s depending on spec, so that's quite a big chunk, and that reflects the MPGs. The BMW does about 38 to the gallon, while the Audi does 35, and I think those differences come down to a degree to the four-wheel drive systems that they deploy, because you might think they're going to be running the same hardware, but from what I can work out, they're not. The BMW one is a little bit lighter in weight and in how often that it's going to be deployed, while the Audi one is, even though it's not like proper Quattro like you get in an A4 or A6, it still seems a little bit more hardcore than the one in the BMW, and that means it creates more drag and it weighs more, and that's why it's a little bit less efficient. But we'll see how that relates to driving shortly. Before that though, let's just have a look at the outside of them before it rains even more in this wonderful Quattro weather, or is it xDrive weather, and then once we've done the outside, we'll have a look at the nice warm inside. So firstly, let's start off then with the 1 Series. As you probably know, this was originally a rear-wheel drive car, and that worked really well for the performance versions like the M135i, M140i, because they had the straight 6 under the bonnet, but that meant it was a bit compromised when it came to practicality, because they were quite cramped inside because they had to run the drive shafts to the back. So basically, BMW have created, with the new 1 Series, their version of the Golf. Now, styling wise, it's not particularly revolutionary. The side profile to me looks a bit too 2 Series, which I think was the first front-wheel drive BMW, but it's not bad. The back with this M styling package looks actually quite good. This car's on 19s, which I'm sure help it a lot. It's a pro spec car, and they're in a sort of titanium colour called Cerium grey, which looks really good. The front though is the bit I like the least. The owner of this car has had this black grille fitted. You can't actually spec this on the cars from the factory, you have to have it done by the dealer, but it does tone down the grille an awful lot, and that does the car a lot of favours, I think, from an aesthetic perspective. What's interesting is how high the bonnet line is. So the Audi really does come down low at the front to its nostrils, while the BMW is still very, very upright, which is, yeah, maybe the problem with the way it looks. But then again, if it was too low at the front, it would look really weird at the back because the back's quite high. Okay, on to the Audi then. So it's not particularly night and day different to the old model. This is, unlike the BMW, the fourth evolution of S3. So they've had a good sort of grounding on how to get these cars right. They look good from the off, to be honest, back in 1996 when they were launched. I guess the big difference with this car is that you've got a lot more sculpting to the panels. So it's a bit wet today, but you can see this concave section is much bigger, gives the car a beefier stance on the road. And at last, with these 19-inch wheels, which again are optional, they do actually fill the arches relatively convincingly, which isn't the case with the 18s, which are obviously smaller but also set into the arches a bit as well. So yeah, I think you're going to have 19s to make this car look good. A lot of people don't like the size of the headlights, which they are quite big, but I don't have an issue with them. They're really nice headlights as well, with this 15 LED array in them. LED matrix, I believe, are standard on this S3. The grille is quite big as well, but it kind of carries it off better than this BMW and better than some of the bigger grille BMWs as well that have come since, like the M4. I'm not a massive fan of the matte aluminium inserts, especially the one down the sill. It just looks a bit clumsy. You can order a black styling pack for this car though, which probably looks okay, but you know, I don't necessarily want it to be completely blacked out, but I don't on all this bright work either. Even around the windows, it's like a 1980s Ford Granada. So I don't know, I think the Audi wins on the exterior design for me anyway. What do you think, guys? Just say in the comments. Now let's have a look inside, where traditionally Audis do very well. Okay, let's start off then by having a look inside the 135i, and the first thing you notice is somebody playing the piano. Probably because the lights are on. But after that, you notice that on the sill cover there, it actually says M135i, not just M, which means that the Audi version that just says S is a bit disappointing. Is that S line? Why doesn't it say S3? You've paid enough money for the S3. It should say S3 really. That's a bit naughty. And then the seats, they are lovely and very, very plush and very Bentley-esque with that diamond quilting. They're Napa leather, standard on this car, although the four-way adjustment isn't. They're nice, but then do you prefer a bit of racy Alcantara? Because these seats look, I don't know, if they're in a Porsche 911 GT3, they would not look wrong. They're really nice. So that's a very grippy centre section to them. Alcantara all over, contrast stitching and electric adjustment. Yeah, I like that a lot. Door cards as well are a little bit more interesting than the Audis, I think. We've got contrast stitching, we've got this metal speaker mesh, which is actually quite nice. Yeah, that's really interesting, because the plastic ones that are part of the door mouldings look really cheap. We've got this ambient lighting there, which is much more interesting than just a strip. We've got a probably plastic door handle, but it feels all right. Yeah, it's definitely a win on the door card stakes. Oh, and a bit of pleather there. Let's have a look at the Audi. This is where they were really disappointing with the A3 S line. So you've got this fake stitching, which I particularly don't like, and then just loads of plastic. Okay, we've got ambient lighting there. And on this car, at least, we've got a tiny little bit of trim there that says Bang & Olufsen, because it's got the B&O sound system as part of the comfort and sound pack. But I think the BMW knocks this for 6, and that's just plastic there. Plastic. Yeah, interesting times. Okay, let's move on to the inside of the car. So you've got some sort of stainless pedals down there that are largely rubber, which is probably a good idea. Actually, before we do that, let's have a look at the lower plastic. So, yeah, they are no worse than the Audis. That's quite a nice bit of texturing on there. Let's have a look under the rubber mats. This carpet, I can guarantee you, is way better quality than the Audis. I clean a lot of cars. I still clean all the cars I sell, so I see a lot of carpets, and this is probably how the A3 used to be, so that's very, very interesting. why don't I just show you what it's like in here, just to prove my point. So you can see there, it's really quite nasty. Yeah, that's not a good carpet. I've just been furnishing my house with carpet, so as well as cleaning lots of cars, I've got a good feel for what's a good carpet and a cheap carpet. Okay, oh nice big paddles, that's very interesting. So instead of the little plastic ones you get on an Audi, we've got some proper ones here that look like they've got paddle extenders on them, so that's really quite nice. Got lots of buttons if you're into your buttons. There's none of that deleting been going on with this car. So yeah, we've got buttons here for climate, we've got buttons here presumably for the stereo, we've got this big infotainment screen. Let's have a look at it. So big difference with the Audi is that we've got the iDrive controller here, and we've still got a touchscreen as well, so it's best of both worlds, I think. And aesthetically, this, you know, fills the gap on the centre console, isn't too intrusive to passenger space, and looks quite good. I don't know if you remember the old A4B8s when they didn't have navigation. The centre console looked really plain, and when you put this nice silver controller there, it really brightened it up. So it's no bad thing. We've got USB there, which looks like a normal one as well. 12-volt socket. I think probably a charging point there for your phone wirelessly, maybe, or just a storage slot, depending on how it's spec'd. Proper buttons on the steering wheel. Very thick steering wheel. I'm not so sure about that, to be honest. Steering wheel heating as well. There are quite a few options on this car though, so some of this may not be standard. I'm quite fascinated by the knurling on there. Ooh. Yeah, that feels nice. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit old-fashioned seeing all these buttons, but you can't argue with the quality. Wow, BMW have pulled it out of the bag. We've got a digital instrument cluster, of course. Should we start the engine up? That definitely sounds fruitier than the Audi. Let's now have a look at the rear space, because that's quite important. Is that my driving position? It's not far off. Ooh, look at that. They are really making an effort with this car. I'm really impressed. I don't even have red stripes on my seatbelts on my Golf GTI TCR, which was the fastest non-limited Golf GTI. Okay, well, that's not a good start. I've just banged my head getting into it, because this line here is quite low, actually, which is strange because it doesn't look like a particularly low car. Okay, well, here we are, guys, inside a BMW. Don't tell anyone. The knee room is pretty generous. Headroom, once you're in, is pretty good, though I seem to be sitting quite high and I can't actually fathom why. I'm not sure if this bit of the roof comes down a lot. We've got a panoramic glass sunroof, which is an option in this car, which I'm sure
what can I help you with?
Is very, it's got voice control as well. I don't know how I managed to trigger that, but yeah, it's definitely a step up over the old 1 Series. And there you can see the ambient lighting a bit clearer now in the back, but the window line seems quite small. But yeah, just feel a little bit claustrophobic here, but yeah, it's perfectly usable. Let's have a look in the boot. So it's got a power tailgate, which I'd imagine is an option. It's got a 380 litre boot, which is pretty much what the standard A3 gets, but when you've got 4-wheel drive, you lose some of that. With the BMW, you don't. So yeah, that's quite good. It's a 2-layer boot, so if you take that out, it's actually pretty big. Got 40, 20, 40 seats, splits, folding seats as well, which is really good. You need that really to make the most of a hatchback. And press that and it closes. A very, very impressive showing from the BMW. I can't believe that. It's the carpet really that does it for me, because it's just so sad that Audi have cheapened it off thinking nobody will notice it. Okay, well, here is the Audi interior. We've done the door cards, we've done the seats. It's got a nice smell to it now, it's got proper leather, so I'm quite happy with that. So it's very, very different, isn't it? I mean, we've still got buttons. This is not a complete tech fest where they get rid of all that and stick it all in the screen like on Golf 8, but it feels a little bit more minimalist than the BMW, particularly down here where we've lost any sort of shifter apart from this sort of upturned cigarette packet. So this is a very minimalist. You could say it looks cheap because there's not a lot to it. I'm not sure how well the piano black will last, but it's okay. I don't like the design of the dash. Personally, I prefer the BMW. I don't like all these vents. I don't like the Lamborghini Urus style air vents. It's just not very Audi, to be perfectly honest. Got proper buttons on the steering wheel, unlike Golf 8. So even though Audi's motto is Vorsprung durch Technik, progress through technology, they seem to have been particularly Luddite about speccing this interior, especially compared to Golf 8 and Leon, but it's not a bad thing. One really annoying thing for me is that in my driving position here, I just cannot reach those buttons there. Now, if they were there, I could, but I can't. And is that set for the left-hand drive market and they haven't bothered to swap them over? Because if so, that is a little bit naughty, Audi. We've got USB-C and normal USB down there, which is quite good. This car's got an adapter in it for USB-C. Front centre armrest there. If you want to see more about the interior, then just check out my video on the normal A3 S-Line, because rather worryingly, it's very similar to this. Once again, we haven't got S3 on the steering wheel, it just says S, which would really bug me. We've got the virtual cockpit, which is great. I just think they're bigger versions because the gauges on the outside are non-virtual, but yeah, these are so configurable, they're brilliant. And we've got this massive screen here, which is really fast and easy to use. So let's have a quick whiz through the navigation so you can see what's what. So if you want to come to Jux's Garage Cafe, people, that is the M40 and that is where we are here. So there's a nice drive up from Banbury down Edge Hill, you will enjoy that. So if you get off at Banbury and take the Banbury to Warwick Road, you'll be coming in the right direction. Okay, let's turn it off and have a look at space in the back. How does it compare to its rival from Munich? Well, this isn't a good start. Let's just check. That's my driving position. I'm not even sure I can get into that. This car is no bigger really than the old one, not in wheelbase. Yeah, that is my driving position. Okay, I'll get in there. Okay, well, it does feel a little bit more cramped than the BMW, but this could well be down to the adjustment of the seat, because it's a little bit laid back there. So that looks a lot better and a lot more like the BMW. I think I must have adjusted it. So yeah, it feels a little bit more spacious in the back here, but not a lot. And again, we've got this very low bit here. We've got no pan roof, so it's not too dissimilar. In fact, one would wonder if BMW have made the car to be just like an A3, because it feels very, very similar. One area where it isn't similar, as I mentioned, is that the boot is smaller on this car because it's got Quattro, the Haldex based all-wheel drive, and a load of camera gear in the boot. It's still a good boot at 325 litres. You've still got 40, 20, 40 folding seats, but you might find you miss that 55 litres of the BMW, and that could decide it for you, but I don't think so. It's still a pretty good boot, that. Okay, we've done the exterior, the interior. Now there's only one thing left, and that's to go and drive these two hot hatches on these amazing roads here in Warwickshire. Okay guys, here we are inside the new Audi S3 Sportback, and if you start rating it based upon the quality of its plastics and more as a place to drive, it makes a lot more sense. This is a really nice cabin. I'd quite happily point this car at some far-flung European destination and go and drive it in one hit. It's just a lovely place to be. The virtual cockpit instrument cluster really does help with that as well, because it's very, very configurable, much more so than that in the BMW, which I was quite disappointed to find out really didn't alter an awful lot. This you can change so many things on, and yeah, once you set it up how you like it, it's brilliant. Just like the BMW, we have got an automatic gearbox, but it's quite a different type of automatic gearbox because we've got a twin clutch. The BMW has got a torque converter, so really a traditional automatic gearbox. They're both paddle shift. We've got these sort of plasticky paddles. The Audi never really seem to do that well, even on R8s, while on the BMW they look a lot nicer, even though they are just plastic as well. The BMW also has a bit of engineered in delay between the gear changes in its sportier mode to give it a bit of character. We don't have that in this car. We just have super smooth changes, whatever mode you're in. So just full throttle, and it just doesn't hesitate. There is no let up in progress, which is great, but it is a little bit clinical. But around town, that's kind of when you want smoothness, reversing and slow speed manoeuvring, and this 7-speeder that was introduced a few years ago is really, really hard to beat. The brakes though are probably quite easy to beat because I think the BMW does beat them. It's got slightly bigger discs. I think it might have more well-nourished calipers as well, but on the road there probably isn't going to be an awful lot of difference. This car is on passive dampers, so we don't have magnetic ride or whatever they want to call it these days, because you can only get that with the Vorsprung model, and that's probably, I think, a few £1,000s extra and bundles them together with a load of things you probably may not want, which is a bit of a shame because, as you probably know, I like adaptive dampers. But the good news is this car on 19s doesn't feel too uncomfortable. It's a bit firm around town on broken surfaces. When you get on the open road, even average surface roads like this one, it's actually not too jarring. It's almost as if the extra energy the suspension has to deal with makes them that little bit more compliant, and yeah, it's not bad at all. It's pretty well judged, but I'd still go for adaptive dampers if I could spec them separately. And you've got to have 19s because they look so good, as you saw earlier. The 18s just don't really suit the lovely sculpting of the body. We've got driving modes on this car, as always. I will bore you by telling you what they are. Dynamic auto comfort and efficiency. I mean, dynamic auto comfort, they're not night and day, particularly because we don't have adaptive dampers. Efficiency means that the throttle response is frankly turgid, but you'll save a few, I don't know, fractions of an mpg by letting the engine go to idle when you come off the gas. The big difference with this car though over the previous generation one is the chassis. When I first drove this car around a roundabout I know pretty well that's got quite a bit of space around it and it's not always very busy, I was amazed to find out that it did lift off oversteer like an old hot hatch, like a 205 GTI, or as I know pretty well, like a Mark II Golf GTI with new front tyres and old back tyres. Of course those cars don't have electronic stability control, this one does, and boy, you would be brave to turn it off from about October to April because the back end does move a lot. Now this is quite unusual for an Audi, and I didn't think a lot of people would believe me. I've not read about this in many of the reviews, so I went back to a roundabout I know pretty well and was able to capture it on film for you guys. So let's just put it in a second. You've got to get the car turned in really lots of front end grip, feel it sort of slide, and then it comes round. Okay, it didn't slide then, but you could feel what the journalists call adjustability, the willingness of the rear axle to have some influence on the way the car goes round corners. Maybe we can do that again. So second gear, you've really got to turn it in, and then it starts to go, and then if you come off the gas, it just slides. Ouch! Now, this is an Audi. Audi shouldn't do that, but I'm so bloody glad that they do. Now, I'll be the first person to say that lift-off oversteer may not be a characteristic many buyers of Audi S3s will be looking for when they're buying a hot hatch, but what it does mean is that the new S3 exhibits a degree of neutrality when driven normally in corners that we've never really had with an S3 before. So on this greasy road, you turn it in, it doesn't feel like all the weight's shifting to the front and it's going to run wide. It's lovely and agile, and just a lot more engaging to drive on roads like this. And all the time you're doing it, particularly in dynamic mode, there's this evocative soundtrack that makes you think you're in an RS3, but you're not. And as soon as you turn into a corner, you know you're not in an RS3 because you're not understeering. It just goes round. So it's really weird hearing that noise, which always to me meant big heavy engine up front, and being able to get around the corner like you're in a hot hatch. It's a great car, this S3, but is it as good as the BMW M135i? Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's go and drive it. Okay guys, here we are behind the wheel of the BMW M135i X-Drive on this very misty and chilly country road here in South Warwickshire. We've probably actually just stepped into Oxfordshire here. So after stepping out of the S3, this car feels decidedly more old school inside with all these buttons everywhere, but if you like that, it's great, and the quality I think is probably more representative of what you'd expect from a premium brand like Audi or BMW. It's really feels well put together, and the material quality looks really good. Carpets included, as we saw earlier. Driving position's great. We've got these electrically adjustable seats. I'm not too sure what standard or option on this car, but there is about £5 worth of options, including the panoramic glass sunroof. Now on startup it does burble a bit more than the S3, but when you're driving along it's pretty well subdued. We're in sport mode now, which gives us a fair bit of fake sound. So where Audi have faked up the 5-cylinder, I think the BMW have faked up the 6. If you want to know what it sounds like outside, I've got some footage now I'll play to you so you can see what it really sounds like to other people. Now make no mistake, this is a quick car, really quick. It's got so much torque that, oh, that was 1 DPR, David Richards, the boss of ProDrive. Yeah, this is a really quick car, but you probably know that anyway. I mean, 300 horsepower, it's enough for cars like these that weigh just about 1.5 tons. I'm more interested in the chassis, and straight away it feels a bit different to the Audi. It doesn't feel as tied down on this greasy, twisty B road. We've got a limited slip diff on the front, which gives it a lot of bite out the corners, but over one of the level crossings on this road, the car did skip about a foot earlier, which was a bit disconcerting. And the gearbox in this sport mode does have this sort of deliberate thump to it, which is a little bit better in comfort but doesn't completely go away. But we have got a torque converter in this car. It's not super smooth DSG or S-tronic twin clutch like in the S3. Ride is pretty good actually. Over that level crossing there, and it was lovely, well damped. Yeah, I'd say it feels a little bit more special than the S3, a little bit racier, a little bit more like a hot hatch should do. But I've got no experience of the M Sport models, so I don't know how close this is in cabin ambience to like a 118i M Sport. But as a car on that road to enjoy, yeah, I totally enjoyed that. But is it better than the S3? Okay guys, now it's time for the verdict. As you probably noticed, the BMW isn't here. That car was loaned to me by a very generous owner, and I didn't want to have to rush making and filming the decision while I was taking up his time, so I've carefully considered it overnight. I could have done with a bit more time driving the BMW, but actually there's not an awful lot of difference between them dynamically. Where the differences lie is how special the BMW feels inside. It feels like a proper hot hatch. It's also got an aura of old school quality, which is sadly lacking from the S3. It's easy to assume that BMW and Audi make the same cars just with different badges on them, but in this case the big difference is that there is nothing in the BMW model range above M, while with Audi they've got RS above S, which they need to keep something back for to justify the hefty price premium of those cars. The other issue for the S3 is that Audi are part of the Volkswagen group, and there's clearly been a round of cost cuttings across the whole organisation, and the A3 has also felt the effect of that. The main distinguishing feature for the S3 over the S-Line are those lovely quilted leather seats, which are very Bentley-esque, but unfortunately they don't make it any more of a hot hatch. Yes, it's really quick, and yes, the chassis now is a revelation, but it's missing that crucial X factor that makes a hot hatch feel special when you're not throwing it around a B road on two wheels. In many respects, it reminds me of the Mark 7 Golf R, which for many people won't be a bad thing. It's lost the flat-footed feel of the old S3, and now the chassis is alive, but the game has moved on. People expect more than that. I'm pretty sure the RS3 will right all those wrongs, but at what price? At a closer price to the S3 and the M135i, we have the Mark 8 Golf R, and first impressions are that they made a real effort to make that car feel special. That it might be dependent on the options, we'll see when the price lists come out. But between the M135i and the S3, there can only be one winner, with a face only a mother can love. It is, I can't believe I'm saying this, the BMW. Okay guys, thanks for watching. I'll get my coat.